Whether you are a new reseller or you've been selling on eBay for a while, you might have this experience, hopefully not, I do hope this for you, where you fall below seller standards. And there are a number of ways this can happen. And then based on that, there are a number of ways to get your store out of below seller standard. This is near and dear to my heart because recently I had my store fall below seller standards, and I'm going to go through why that happened to me and my store and what I did to get my store back in good standing. We're going to talk about all the different ways that you can fall below seller standard and then some of the different ways that you can also repair this. If you're new here, hi, my name is Margaret. I am a reselling homeschooling mom. I sell online to help support my family. And if you like what you see here and you want ideas for how to make money and live the life of your dreams, then consider subscribing to the channel. I want to thank Lavender Gal for asking this question. Does eBay slow down traffic to stores when they may reach the below standard? As a new seller, I'm so nervous about this happening, and cross-listing can sure cause the same problem you've experienced very quickly. It seems like eBay views are way down in the last 10 to 14 days or so across the board. Lots of other YouTubers are saying the same thing. That is partly true, yes, that your eBay below seller standard, when you get that, it can affect where you show up in search. It can slow things down for you. You may not show up as high in search ranking unless you have something super unique where it's like the only one on there. But if you're selling something that there's more of other people, if they've got a higher seller standard, generally you're going to see those in ranking. I still advocate for cross-posting, and that's just something that as you become more experienced as a seller, either using a platform like List Perfectly, which I do, which can deactivate listings when it sells, or going in and doing this manually. I know for myself, I like to do this because I can make more money that way. Last year, I guess it was resolved earlier this year, I'll have to double check the exact dates, but I fell below seller standard in my store, which is very unusual for me because pretty much since I started selling, I've been a good standing, top rated seller or just good seller standard. And what happened was I bit off more than I could chew. And I was selling I sell on multiple platforms, which I still advocate for. But what I did was we also at the time started selling locally. This is back when I was selling in Austin. And we were selling things on Facebook Marketplace. We were selling furniture. We were selling appliances. We were doing really well financially, and I decided to move all of my inventory to our storage lockers, which we had, I think, about 5 storage lockers at the time. And what became of that is that in the process of this, I didn't come up with a good system for figuring out where items were in the shift between photographing them at home, getting them to the storage, getting the things, in the right place to find them. So my listings I would have to cancel things because I couldn't find them, which it was my fault because I didn't have a good enough system in place. So I would know this has been processed, photograph listed, it goes over here, it goes in this tub at the storage locker. And then at the same time, whenever things would sell, I would have to save up that for the day, go to the storage locker, which was a little distance away, gather up everything. And it was really draining a lot. I thought, well, I'm at the storage locker anyway because of all the local sales stuff we're doing. I didn't think at the time it would be a big deal, but it turns out it was a big deal. So my shop fell below seller standard because I was canceling too many sales, and 2, I was not getting my things shipped off in time. So those are 2 of the areas that we're going to talk about, but then there are also some others that we'll need to address. One of the ways that this could happen is if you are getting a high defect rate for your shop, which means people are returning items or opening cases against you or your store because the item was not as described and they're opening returns. So if you're getting a lot of people saying the item is not as described, then that is something that can over time affect your eBay store. So the way that you want to mitigate that, and I know as a new seller, I struggled with that because I really wanted to start making sales. So sometimes I downplayed some of the defects, which is the opposite of what you want to do. You want to just overshare what all is wrong with it, because what is it? Under promise, over deliver, right? And so when I was an early seller, luckily early on I didn't get below seller standard, but I did have some returns where people were like, hey, this had a defect and you didn't disclose that. So that's something that you want to make sure you are photographing every angle, anything, any flaws, that you're disclosing that in photographs, in the listing. Because I've also had that happen where I shared the defect in the photo, but I didn't disclose it in the words, and that hit against me. This was again early on, but you live and learn through these mistakes that you make. So that's the first thing. Having a high defect rate or a lot of returns for item not as described, that can start affecting your ranking as far as your seller standard. This is the one that partially hit me, which was the late shipment rate. You have the opportunity to go in there and select, are you going to ship next day, 2 to 3 days, in a week? And if you already know, like, I'm so busy during the day, maybe you also work during the day or you take care of somebody, and like, there's no way I can ship next day. So when I was having to go to the storage locker and get my items and come back, it was unrealistic for me to expect myself to be able to ship in one day. So one of the ways I could have avoided that was setting my shipping rate out to 3 to 5 days. So that might affect people buying from you, because a lot of times they want their items fast, in this Amazon free shipping, next day, same day kind of shipping culture. It sometimes can deter people from buying from you, but you've got to weigh that for yourself and decide, is it worth like maybe losing a sale versus getting below standard? And then you for sure are going to probably lose sales because of your rating. Another way that you might fall below seller standard is if you're getting really bad feedback. So over time, now if you get one piece of bad feedback and you've got it weighed against all the good feedback you've got, hopefully, then it's not going to affect you too much. But if you start racking up a lot of negative feedback, then that's something that can definitely affect your seller standard. And I do want to say, like, I discourage sellers from what I call poking the bear. If you've got somebody you've sold something to and they haven't left you feedback, for me, no news is good news. And I don't send them a message and say, hey, could you leave me feedback? Because what if they were unhappy and they didn't want to leave negative feedback or say something that you don't want? So in that case, I would just not. What I do is I include a thank you note with a coupon code and, please leave feedback in the package. And if that's not enough to like spur them to do that, then I would just leave it alone. Sometimes if you go in though and you leave the seller feedback, sometimes that will like spur their memory, like, oh yeah, I need to go leave feedback too. So that's another way to kind of get around that without being really direct and pushy with the buyer, that is, just to go in and leave them feedback, and hopefully they'll leave you feedback. I have mine set up on automatic, so you can automatically send feedback to buyers when they buy and you ship it out. So kind of going with the item not as described, if you have a high return rate, that's something else that can affect your seller standard. So making sure your products are really well described, really good photographs, got the measurements, everything in there is disclosed. That will help keep you from getting item not as described and a lot of returns. These next two go hand in hand. One has to do with poor communication with your buyers. Now, if they send you messages, you want to have, good communications with them. And if they're asking questions, especially after they've received the product or whatever it is you're selling, and you're not responding to them, that could lead to negative feedback or a return. So making sure you're having positive and professional communication with your buyer will tend to lead to a better buyer experience, which will lead to better feedback. And then also shipping. So if you're shipping your item out, make sure that you're packaging it really well. Make sure you're using nice material, like clean material. I know some people will use old food containers or things like that. Like, make it look professional, use clean stuff. I'm not saying you have to go buy everything new, because there's lots of ways to get shipping materials without having to spend a ton of money, but package it well, make sure it's not going to break or shift around in the box too much, because that is something, again, that can lead to an unsatisfied buyer and they could leave you negative feedback based on your shipping. So another way you might get a drop in your seller rating is if you are not following eBay policy. So let's say you are listing prohibited items. This is something where you can get your store suspended. So if you're listing things that, say like ivory, I always use that as an example, or things that just can't be listed on eBay, and there's a whole list of these prohibited items for eBay. But if you try to get around it and skirt it and not use certain keywords and they catch you, they're going to deactivate that item. They could suspend you permanently or for a short amount of time. It could affect your seller rating. So it's not really worth it to get kicked off or to get suspended on selling on eBay by breaking some of these policies. Some of the other policies are, say you've got an item on auction and you've had multiple people bidding on it, and then you cancel the auction out and people that have bid on it, are disappointed. So that's something that can also lead to a defect, which would affect your seller standard. And the next one is one that affected me. I was having to cancel items because I couldn't find them. And it drove me nuts because I knew the item hadn't sold. I knew I had it somewhere, but because the system that I had in place wasn't adequate, and there were honestly too many people's hands in the pots too. Things got lost in the shuffle, and that was very frustrating. So I had to cancel a number of orders because I could not find the item. So I'm owning that. That was totally something that happened, and live and learn. But I was able to fix it, and that was good. And then another way is if people are returning items and you're not resolving those, say you're not refunding their money, or you're not allowing the return to come through, and there are just different ways that people might open a case against you if they've returned something and you're not giving them their money back. So that can affect your seller rating too. I accept returns. I get this question a lot. Do I accept returns? I do, because why not? If they return it and it's in the same condition that I got it in, then I can refund them. I can resell it. No big deal. And I've had that happen multiple times. What do you do? How do you get out of this if you have got a below seller standard? One of the things that I would recommend is to go through your listings and make sure that everything is as it should be. So depending on why you got the below seller standard, it kind of depends. It would adjust how you are trying to fix this. But so making sure that you don't get anything else that happens is really important, because you don't want to dig that hole any deeper. So I would suggest going through, checking all of your photographs, your listings for accuracy, make sure your handling time is what you want it to be, where you can get that item out. Going through and doing your inventory. This is one of the things that I did, especially after the move. When we moved to Colorado, I didn't turn my eBay store back on until I had physically put my eyes and hands on every single item, which is a lot because I have over 1,000 items in my store. But I'm like, I am not doing this again. I have to make sure everything that is listed in my store, I know exactly where it is and that I absolutely have it. So I took the time, and I took one category, I took all the buttons. All right. And I actually still found another bag that I hadn't gone through yet. Every single button. And then and this is where List Perfectly came in handy for me too, because during the move and during all the shuffle, I had my store deactivated for so long. I think I opened it up here and there, but after 90 days, if all of the listings that you have that are unsold or you have them deactivated, they're gone. So I went in there and was like, okay, let me go through and check everything and reactivate. And it was like, holy smokes, everything is gone. So I had all of my listings, luckily, in List Perfectly, so I could go through that and make sure, and then go and post them from List Perfectly. Whew! I mean, it truly, really saved my bacon. If you're interested in that, this isn't a commercial for it, but I have a link down below for 30% off your first month. Cross-post it, saves all your listings. I'm telling you what, it really was it was like a godsend in the moment. So you're going to go through, make sure you've got an inventory done, all your items, you know where they are, especially if you're having to cancel sales because you can't find the item, right? Make sure that you've got your shipping time set the way you want it to, whether it's next day, 3 days, whatever you can live with, and make sure you've got all the shipping material that you need, because sometimes that slows you down too. I had that happen. I had a record sell the other day, and then I realized, oh wait, I don't have a box for this. And I had to kind of like Franken box a box, and probably the person's going to get it and was like, this is overkill. But I was like, that's what I got. So it's super well packaged in a very big box. Anyway, next is communication. Make sure you're communicating with your buyers in a professional manner. And if you are getting negative feedback, look for ways that you can resolve this, whether with the buyer, especially, and this is one of those times when communication is really important, and professional communication, because sometimes you can resolve the issue with the buyer depending on the person, and they can go and change their feedback for you. And if you've got a buyer, I mean, it doesn't hurt if you've got a buyer that you've been super professional with and they have just dug their heels in and they're going to be unreasonable or all of, at that point, just take a step back, and it doesn't hurt to call eBay and ask, hey, this is the situation. This is what I've tried. What can we do about this? And sometimes, there have been a few times, usually they don't get too involved, but hey, it doesn't hurt to ask. Another thing to do when you are about to ship an item out is to double check it to make sure there weren't any flaws that you missed. I've had this happen a couple times where as I'm boxing up an item, there's a flaw that I see that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this happened. And I message the buyer before I ship it out, just saying, hey, just letting you know that I just noticed this, the button is missing off the thing and I didn't notice it before and I'm so sorry. Please let me know, do you want to cancel the sale? Because if they cancel the sale, it's different. Do you want to cancel the sale, or do you, I can send you a coupon, or I can give you a partial refund, anything that you can do to kind of make it mitigate the problem before it arises. Because if they get it and then you get a, item not as described, there's not a whole lot of ways of coming back from that. So going forward and disclosing that, like, I just saw this and I'm so sorry. I can give you a coupon. I can give you a partial refund. Or if you want to cancel the sale, then we can go that route, and giving them all of these options, because then they'll feel like, okay, people like options. So they can make that choice for themselves versus being a disappointed buyer. So another way that you might consider trying to dig out of the below seller standard is the more sales that you're getting that result in a positive experience for the buyer and good feedback, where you're showing that you are following the rules and you're doing good business, that can start moving the pendulum back in the right direction. So what you might consider is, running some sales or lowering prices to get more sales coming through. Maybe sending a coupon code to some of your previous buyers and, like, hey, there's a sale in my store, just for loyal buyers, here's a 20% off coupon. And that can start generating more positive experiences and sales and positive feedback, that when eBay comes back through and they check for what your seller standard should be, that will kind of bump you over the edge. What I ended up doing, because it kind of worked in my favor because I was already on vacation mode for so long, and I only had a few sales here and there because I would turn my store on for a little while with whatever I had inventoried, and then I had to turn it off again because we moved a couple times over the last year. So it was a really weird year for us, and basically time heals all wounds, even on eBay. So with the few sales I got, and just with time of like, okay, nothing has really sold in my shop, but nothing bad has happened either. So that also worked in my favor. I want to show you where you can go on eBay to see what your seller standard is. You're going to come over to Sell and then come to Overview. When you scroll down in Overview, you can see right over here, seller level above standard. If we evaluated you today, above standard. And here they're going to show you. If you have a lot of defects, they're going to have it there. If you've got late shipment, it's going to have there. Cases closed without seller resolution. Tracking upload on time, validated, da 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 da. All right. And so then they also say they're not evaluating it every single day. So it's not like, oh, you know, I fixed these things, now fix it. No, they do it on certain days. So next time they evaluate, July 20th. So you just have to wait till the next evaluation comes around. Being able to look at this can really give you some good guidance for where you could use improvement in your business, right? I hope you were able to use some of these tips if your store has fallen below seller standard. Don't give up, don't lose hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way out of this hole and you can do it. So I have definitely been there and have taken the time to get my shop back in good standing, and everything is right as rain right now. Beyond that, like, I don't really stress too much about being a top rated seller. I know there are ways to get to that, but for me, it's like if my items are selling, I'm doing okay, I've got good feedback, above seller standard works for me, then I don't really stress too much about being a top rated seller. I mean, everybody has their different priorities, so that might be something you want to look into. You can go through on eBay and see what are the requirements to becoming a top rated seller. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share with somebody that might also use the tips and the advice for getting their shop back in good standing. And I will see you on the next video.